Having your shared vision is really important.
We don't give a shit who's right. We're just coming in and saying, what is the math going to support and what is going to allow you to accomplish the most of what's most important to you?
If you are in a relationship with someone, you're both going to have very different opinions, feelings, and attitudes about money, and neither of them are bad. I would say the only wrong way to do it is to never talk about it.
Welcome to Beyond the First Million with myself, Gideon and Drucker, my much taller colleague, Jordan Haines. If you want to know what it means to be introvert versus an extrovert, you just need to watch Jordan and I for the 20 minutes before we film. I am literally like a statue. I'm writing, I'm editing, I'm just like peaceful by myself. I need to preserve my energy. You've had an hour-and-a-half conversation about God knows what with not a care in the world. As soon as the camera turns on, you good? Yeah, no. Why wouldn't I be good?
Yeah, I'm the guy, I was just telling him, I'm the guy to talk to the Uber driver. Which this is probably a nice revelation for the listeners because in these episodes, you're doing a lot of the talking, which is great. And I'm more just adding to it. So off camera, I'm doing all the talking.
Yeah, exactly.
Although it's mostly nonsense.
Off camera, I can be off camera, but we are on camera. We want to share what we're talking about today, and it's going to be all about financial planning as a couple. I think we're both excited to do this particular episode because there are so many stories that we could have pulled from. I'm going to start with, it really happened, this was a few months ago, great clients and actually avid listeners, so I know they're going to hear the story as I'm sharing it. But we were on a prospective client call, and I think it was the very first Right Fit call, husband and wife, and about 5 minutes into the conversation, I asked, what are you interested in? What do you need help with? The wife says, yeah, so I'm really interested in living life, creating memories for my family, doing exciting things, and my husband just wants to save it all until we're old and gray and 80 and we can't do anything with it. So that's our family in a nutshell. Now, granted, she was making a joke and he was on the call and he's like, yeah, that pretty much sums up how we think about money. Now, obviously they were exaggerating right for the emphasis, but also kudos to them. They were letting us know, hey, we think about money a little bit differently. We're aware of it. And we'd like your team's help to help us formulate a family plan. Like, how do we combine? How do we think about this together? So she wasn't making fun of him. I mean, she was a little bit. And I'm not making fun of them by telling the story. But that is a lot of what we do in helping clients with their financial planning. Something that you and I have learned over the years, most financial planning problems are not problems that can be solved on a spreadsheet. Last episode, we talked about investing and rates of return, and that all matters. But when it comes down to it, most of what we're talking about with clients is more about decision-making, communication, competing priorities, and even competing life visions of how you want things to go. And that's everything we're going to be talking about today.
One of our favorite thinkers in our space in particular, his name's Carl Richards.
Yeah.
I know you've listened to a few of his conversations, but he's done something at events that I've actually been to where he'll draw a dollar sign and just say what comes to mind, like the first word that comes to mind. And it's really interesting because everyone's so different.
Right.
Some people have said like just traumatic, right? Some people have been like, opportunity, exciting. So like the emotions as it relates to money is so different. And I mean, that's obvious, right? Everyone has different experiences. When you start to merge a life together, right, with someone else who has different emotions about money, different goals, different attitudes, different feelings about it, it's really difficult to figure out, which order to go. There's not a right answer, right? Like everyone's just different for a reason. There's not a right way to money, right?
Yep.
It's just navigating and merging those together is tough sometimes.
It's funny. I've been in that room where Carl does the dollar sign. And again, like that's not, I'll say like everybody should be doing that or there's kind of like a way he gets to that point. But I was in one where somebody just said, my dad, like he said his dad. It's just like his dad grinded his whole life in a job that did not pay a lot of money to get him to a point where he was a financial planner and was able to take care of his family at a level. And so just when he, like any decision he makes about money, it could be down to like when he decides to get a bagel and spend $10, like something about his dad and his childhood, like that wasn't a decision that was so free for his parents growing up. All Carl did was put a dollar sign on a whiteboard and like that all came out. We all have our own money story. And I think we both know the way somebody thinks about their own finances, about if they want a vacation home, they want to buy a home, they want to rent, how much they want to save, how much they want to defer to the future. All of it really comes from a lot of, if you dig deep enough, how they grew up with money. It's, hey, my parents did a fantastic job of saving and building, and I want to be able to provide my kids the same life I had. Or alternatively, yeah, my parents did a lot of cool things, but now they're in their 70s and they're not really in good financial position. I don't want to be in the position. Those are extremes. But I think a lot of how we relate to money, something you do have to work through is you have your story, your spouse has theirs, and now you need to say, hey, well, how do we build a joint vision, a joint financial way of thinking about things. And by the way, this episode is not about you need to open a joint investment account or, this isn't about where money is allocated. This is how do you think through a financial vision that has both of your stories, right, which are probably totally separate, and combine them into the same thing.
Yeah, love it.
Marriage creates a new challenge, right? When it comes to financially building a vision that supports what you want to do. Now you have to create something entirely new, a shared financial identity. You need to basically build a new coherent financial life. And it's one of the reasons that I think a lot of our clients, not everybody, of course, but a lot of our clients are couples because you're just adding an additional variable, right, into your spending decisions, your saving decisions. When you have kids, why do a lot of our clients have kids? Because when you're thinking about education funding and legacy planning, and do we buy private school? Like there's so many more financial decisions and inflection points that you need to consider. Now, how we want to kind of frame and phrase this particular episode is when it comes to working with couples, I would say there are three archetypes, dynamics that we see. Probably the most common is when a couple they're both engaged, right? Like they both care about the money conversation and financial planning, investing, what have you, but they're just wired totally differently, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody's a spender, somebody's a saver. Somebody's a little more optimistic and the other person, hey, the sky is falling. What if two totally just different ways of projecting things into the future? Everybody thinks differently about money. And I know we have a story, and if you want to share.
When we work with a client and we build their financial life plan, right, we are trying to incorporate both the emotions and the feelings and their goals and ambitions, as well as just like the pure numbers, right, like what you can do. And so oftentimes,
what can you afford? What can you not? Yeah. If you could afford that, what would we have to change over here and bring that all together into one coherent scenario plan that they can actually live through?
Yeah, and one of the best ways we found to present this and explore different paths is to look at different scenarios. And basically, I mean, every decision just has trade-offs. And so our job is to just say, here are the trade-offs, and do so in as an unemotional as possible. This is not just like these clients. This happens a lot where we present and honestly, we look at like a decision they need to make. Like, for example, we want to buy a bigger home in a different place.
Right.
And when we brought this up, it spurred some emotions.
So I think it was, they wanted to retire early, buy a much bigger primary home, and then spend a lot more on vacation. Their kids were getting a little bit older and they could travel more. And we kind of laid it out of saying, hey, all three of these simultaneously is going to be difficult because if we look at your cash flow, your savings rate, your existing net worth, and I remember the wife looked at her husband and said, I've been saying this for years. Like, we can't do all these three things. I don't really understand how you thought we could. Jordan and Gideon, this is great, but like, I've been saying this the whole time. And yes, she was right on, not even on the surface, she was right. If they tried to do all three things with no other changes to income, it was difficult. He responded, and it really was like that on the call. I think she yelled at him a little bit with us and just waiting. Having those type of conversations with an objective third party that is not emotionally tied to either of your perspectives or the way you think about it, we don't give a shit who's right? Like, we're not trying to make one person happy. We're just coming in and saying, what is the math going to support? And what is going to allow you to accomplish the most of what's most important to you? Just being able to be in a meeting, sometimes not speak, let things air out and them get it. I mean, I'm describing a couples therapist in a way. Obviously, that's not what we do, but there's a degree of that, of letting people have conversations that they would never actually have in the course of their day, right? You're not going to drop your kids off at soccer practice, make dinner, and go back to work, and then have a life conversation around buying a larger home and vacation and trade-offs and when can you retire. I've only been married for 8 months, but I don't think that's an average Tuesday night at the dinner table, right? So us just giving that room to breathe. But the husband's takeaway was interesting, and he came back and said, yeah, that all is true. That makes sense. But let's just get rid of the international home and I'll work another 3 years. And he's like, I was being conservative on my income, so let's assume I make an extra $300,000. His reaction was basically, all right, I hear you. But I was just trying to workshop ideas. And like, he wasn't taking any of the goals as this is what it has to be. He was like, we're doing the big primary home. We're going to travel more and everything else can fall by the wayside. And they got to a point where they were on the same page, right? Because all she cared about was making sure that they were secure, right? That, hey, if we buy this home and do all these other things, are we going to run out of money? And as long as he got the plan back to a point where, no, we're not going to run out of money because we're not going to do these other three things that they originally asked us to show, they ended up in a good place, is the moral of the story. But they just thought about money differently.
Yeah.
So they got to a good place. But it took hashing things out in real time in order to show that. And a lot of time, the argument happened and then it fell by the wayside. A lot of times the argument just kind of goes away. How often are couples actually like outlining what's most important to them? Right? Like line by line, like this is our top priority, is the primary home because we have 2 kids and we just need more space, right? It's like kind of everything supports that vision. And then we take it from there. But they needed to have that conversation before they ended up at the outcome.
Yeah. I think my 2 takeaways from this is, number one, to your point that you just made, having your shared vision is really important. That's a relatively easy conversation to have. I think the 2 stories that you shared, the first client story and then that one that you just shared, I think the thing that I'm noticing that's different about both of them is, on one hand, your first client was someone that they knew things about each other well enough that they were okay talking about it out loud, right? Like, he's a spender, I'm a saver, or he's a saver, I'm a spender. These are the things we want. And they were okay with it.
Yeah.
Right? Like that had already been cleared. Whereas the second maybe hadn't had that like clear conversation around what things are. And I can think in my own relationship, I am like a dreamer, right? Money to me is enabling. Like I'm always thinking about the big next thing, like how we're going to use
you're the big picture.
My wife is very much like, money's restrictive, right? Like if we don't have enough, like, and so for the first 10 years of our marriage, it's been like her becoming comfortable with me just dreaming, and then her like not taking everything I say as like, we are going to do this. And now we know that about each other. So it's kind of like cleared there, and neither of them are wrong. Neither perspectives are wrong. Neither lenses are wrong. And so I think that's the point we're making here is, if you are in a relationship with someone, you're both going to have very different opinions, feelings, and attitudes about money. And neither of them are bad. They're both there for a reason. And just understanding that, I think, is really helpful.
I'm glad you said how long you've been married, because I feel like people would be listening and hearing that I got married in the last 12 months, like, dude's giving marriage, like a couple financial planning, like, cause he even had like, he's been married a week and a half. So like 10 years, friends, 10 years. He knows what he's talking about, even if I'm new to the marriage game. Unrelated to this, but I was listening to Jeff Bezos do an interview recently, and he was talking about what are good and bad types of conflict resolution. And he was saying his first point was, compromise sounds healthy, right? Like, oh, we should want to compromise. And he's saying compromise is usually not the best way of arriving at an outcome. Because what is compromise at the end of the day? It's kind of both people just wanting to be agreeable more than they want to be truth-seeking, as he put it, right? It's like, all right, well, I think 10 and you think 0. So let's like land 5. That works for both of us. And there are certain things in financial planning, well, no, it's either closer to 10 or it's closer to 0, right? He used the example of like, how high is the ceiling, right? If I said it's 20 feet and you said it's 5, we shouldn't compromise and meet in the middle. We should actually take out a tape measure, figure out, you would probably help more than me because the ceiling's pretty high, but we'd figure out how tall it actually is. And that's a lot of what we're talking about with financial planning. Like, compromise from the context of, hey, you want to do this, want to do that, but how do we make sure we can do the most of what you both want to do? And like, maybe compromise once you've done the legwork and say, hey, here's what's feasible. Here's where you can land. We can do all of this, and this is going to be tough. But not just, hey, we want 2 totally different things and we're going to meet in the middle. And I think that's what doing the plan, doing the work, having conversations get at, is that it's not compromise. You're getting to the end where both people could be happy, even if they're ending at different places than they started, right? And the other form of conflict resolution that's not the best, obviously, is when one person just kind of exhausts the other person, right? It's kind of like whoever is more stubborn or louder or cares more wins, so to speak. I really would say, looking back, like all of our couple like meetings when we're talking about, I wouldn't say anybody has ever like won, where it's like, oh, we're just following one person's lead. It's coming with their own story. We're building a shared vision board, set of goals, and then we're figuring out how we want to get there. And they're both kind of agreeing, and instead of either one of them feeling like they're sticking to their old map, they're building their new one. We're trying to like find the truth, find like what does actually make the most sense based on your shared vision of how we got there.
Yeah, you want a shared true reality, right? Like something that you can anchor yourself to, because I think sometimes when we're just operating within feelings, we're just trying to prove who's right and who's wrong, right? And that's it.
And it starts there, and if we've done our job, then it doesn't end there. The second dynamic is more kind of similar to what I said about like winning the argument, where one person is more financially interested, involved, and they run everything in the household, right? One spouse handles virtually all of the finance, the other spouse isn't really that interested. Now, what's interesting from my perspective, just how many new clients, new calls we get, you might think it's the disinterested spouse that is reaching out for financial help. Hey, they want to make sure their spouse is doing the right things. They want to learn more. It's usually not. It's usually the spouse that is like tasked with running the financial plan program that gets to a point where they're just kind of exhausted of doing everything themselves. They want a second opinion. They want a thought partner. They want somebody to help educate their spouse on all the things maybe they have wanted to incorporate into the plan, but like, let's be honest, it's tougher to listen to your spouse about certain things than it is an objective outside voice. And they're using hiring a financial planner, in this case us, to educate their spouse in, hey, I want you to know enough, God forbid something happens, but even just like, I'd like to be able to share some of this with you, and we bring them along slowly. And that's how my family was, my parents growing up. Granted, my dad's a financial planner, so like maybe a little more obvious. My wife and I are the same. And by the way, this is not a gender thing. In the past, it was, right? Usually like kind of the 50s version, the man runs the finances, wife is not involved. I would say for our clients, it's at least 50-50, if not more. I would say we have more. Regardless, that's not the point, but it's just kind of natural that one person in a relationship is handling the finances, right? Like that's how couples work. You delegate everything. One person handles the landscaping, one handles the dry. Like it's kind of inevitable that one person is going to be more interested. This is not a bad thing. What we both know is super important is both people need to be involved in the big decisions. Are you on track for retirement? How do you want to think about your kids' education? When can you buy the vacation home? All the life decisions.
I don't know if we've talked about this framework. This is something that you brought to me a few months ago, and we've incorporated it into our financial life plan process. We talk a lot about direction, details, and decisions. But when we look at that, we want them to be involved in the direction, right? Because we're moving towards something.
Right, so just the order of operations is you start with
direction, where are we going? Details, how we're going to get there, making the final decision and just taking action, going in that order, right? And but we want both couples to be involved in that direction, because I've had situations in the past with a client couple that I worked with where the direction was established by one and not by the other, or bought in by the other, and we start moving in that direction. We realize this is not what's going to happen. Like this person is not involved and excited about it, and that's where it gets really tricky. So yes, involved in the direction, but after that, how we actually get there, the tactical things, right? Like that doesn't.
Right. That is it. And again, like, you have an advisor to trust them to get to that point of tactics where you've already done most of the work by setting the direction and what you're going to accomplish. But to your point about direction, I had our first delivery meeting, which is really the one we talk about the life planning scenario. And somebody said her husband, like, he's not going to be able to join this meeting. And we'd planned it like 3 weeks in advance. They're super busy. They have 3 kids. And I said, look, honestly, like, there are other meetings where I would just go with the flow and say, you know what, if we need to map out your investing, like the individual investment pieces, and totally fine. I said, we have to reschedule this meeting. I said, I would be doing a disservice to you both if we went through all of the scenarios and got feedback and adjusted. And I'm sorry, but we have to reschedule. It's important as they had time to be on the meeting together and map it out. So again, there's nothing wrong with one spouse wanting to lead the charge and handle the finances. We know it's really important that both of you are involved in the big decisions that matter. We come across couples like them where somebody's the artist and somebody's the finance. Somebody's in tech and is not paying attention to their stock options, and the other spouse has basically been managing their stock options for 7 years. This is all normal. Every couple finds their own cadence, right? Finds their own way of doing things. We're just going to have our way of helping for our little sliver in the financial domain. The third dynamic is the most straightforward, is total alignment, where you think about money the same way. You're just basically on the same page, right, of what you're trying to get to financially. Now, you might say, well, this is the best. It's the easiest way because you don't need to change perspectives. You don't even really need to create that kind of take individual plans and build a shared plan because you're there already. And that's all true. But there's one, I don't say problem, but one thing you would want to make sure you're aware of, which is tunnel vision. Because if you're thinking about things the exact same way as your spouse financially, we need to buy this home. We both want to spend $5 million on this home and we're committed and we think it's the most important thing in the world. You kind of don't have anybody in the household saying, can we afford this? Is this the best thing that we should be doing? Right? If like opposites attract, it's financially, I would say it's a good thing for people to be wired a little bit differently when they're thinking about their financial future. And I think about, we had a client, a couple recently that I would say they were both on the side, like, very optimistic, things will work out, like they wanted what they wanted and didn't really want to entertain notions of, well, what if this doesn't work out? Now, again, they obviously wanted to entertain that a little bit or they wouldn't have hired us in the first place. We're not going to rubber stamp somebody's financial decisions if it doesn't work. But they want to spend like $50,000 a year on vacation.
Yeah.
And again, I like giving the numbers because A, they're not made up stories, but B, hopefully it puts things in place. They made ballpark $400,000 of income, which is good money, but it's not the level of income that you can really spend $50,000 a year on travel with everything else they wanted to do. And I remember we had multiple meetings where we basically framed it like that of, hey, this travel budget with you guys want to retire early, like these two things are at odds. We kind of have to pick a little bit. I think they were seeing things a little black and white of, we're saying, hey, don't travel. We're saying, no, what if 50,000 became 25,000?
Yeah.
Right? How would we travel differently, right? If we had a little bit more of a budget, and I would argue at that amount that it's not even changing the amount you're traveling or where you're going. It's just being a little bit more thoughtful as you spend. But they had a tough time really taking in this information. They were so on the same page of like, travel's super important. And it took a few meetings of saying, guys, like, we hear you. And ultimately, like, our job is to support whatever vision you want to tell us. So if you're like, hey, we're doing this, but then our job is to say, hey, that is going to mean 3 years of working additionally or not being able to power save into your kids' education, where it might become a matter of, hey, can we fully fund education or could we fully fund retirement? Like, at some point, you have to make that decision of what do we care the most about. And honestly, that's kind of an open question at this point because, and again, I think why I'm bringing it up now, I think it's something that they have been so attached to for so long without any outside voice saying that, you know what, 50,000 a year at our income, like, is not really sustainable. They were on such the same page that they couldn't entertain ideas outside of what they had already landed on.
The greatest pitfall for people who are totally aligned and very similar temperament is this echo chamber, right?
Right, yeah, exactly.
We know what and it's not necessarily saying that like things have been bad, right? It's not to say that you've made bad decisions. It's just that, hey, are you seeing what you don't see? And it's interesting, I'm sure you've seen this too. It's pretty common for us to get a new client who they're both aligned and they're both engaged and they're both very similar. And one of the first things that they say to us is, hey, we're here because we need someone else,
right?
Because we have done all that we know how to do.
And you know, we want to make sure we're not missing anything. I would say in general, a lot of our clients come to us like, they're making a lot of money, they're sharp, they're smart, they're doing most of the right things. It's not like we're getting people that have no idea about any of this. They have this baseline. And again, to bring it back to like couples, is like we help both spouses, and then you have kids and it goes on from there, see the vision, right? We are that outside objective voice, building them on the right track. And I think we mentioned a personal trainer that might have been on an earlier episode we filmed, but my sister is a personal trainer, or was. Right now she has a 5, 3.5, and a 1-year-old, and she's just fighting for her life on a daily basis, seemingly. But she has Drucker Fitness, which is a currently dormant, but soon to come back fitness business. But when she's working with a lot of her clients, which she hasn't in a few years, but when she does, a lot of them come and they say, part of why we want on a trainer is when we show up, we just want to be told what to do and like know we're going to walk out of here having a great workout with our brain turned off a little bit. So for a lot of our clients that like, they've been doing all of this entirely by themselves, and most of our clients have stock options and equity. Like, there's so many other things they need to think about. And they're like, it would be cool to not think about all of this every time, or like showing up on a review meeting that Jordan has built the agenda and is going to map out how all of this comes out. And I can just react. And this is a tangent and we'll wrap up here, but we work with consultants or maybe like my CPA, like other people that we're the client. And something that drives me crazy is when I'm the client and I have to show up on a meeting with like setting the agenda or like ask, it's like, no, you're in charge. Like, I'm hiring, paying you. Like, lay out what we should be talking about because I'm coming from my world and I'm coming into this meeting to enter your world. You talk about shared financial identity, having the outside person to move it along is a big part of why you would seek it out a planner in the first place.
Proactive is the word a lot of clients use, right? Like, I'm looking for someone that is proactive in my life, and that's what they're looking for. My biggest takeaway, and if there's any takeaway I'd want our listeners to have from this conversation, would be that like, there's not really a right way to navigate your relationship with money
and your spouse
or your partner. There's not a right way to do it. I would say the only wrong way to do it is to never talk about it and to not know what your style is, right? Do you have the same temperament, and are you both really engaged in the money, or is one of you tend to be a little bit more engaged, or are both of you really engaged and you're the exact same human being, right? It doesn't really matter all that much. You just need to know what you are so that you can start to navigate it in the right way, right? So the only wrong way to do it is to never know.
Right. Or wait till you're in your 50s or 60s, and it's just been a source of frustration, all that.
Can I just share it because you just said that. I'm going to share one story and then you can close this out. My parents, I think our parents are similar age. My parents are, my father retired about 3 years ago, and I did an exercise with them. I had a deck of cards that just has a word on it, right? And the idea is we want to get a sense for your values. And I had them sit across the dinner table. It was just me and them. And I was trying to like learn how to do this exercise. And you have a deck of cards, you lay them out, and you kind of do in a pyramid of like, what are the 10 most important words and what do those mean to me? And we did it, and they were so different. And the conversation, these are people who have been married for 30 plus years. And you'd expect like, oh, you're totally aligned. You know, my mom was like, it was very much centered around learning and home and beauty and things like that. My dad was like adventure and excitement. And like having them have that conversation, be like, oh, that's the thing that really drives you. But the thing that they had shared was home and family. And that was really important to them. Because when we did this, he was in the process of retiring. It allowed them to get really centered around what their common vision was, right?
What they wanted to do for the next
We
5
want to have a home that people can come to and is focused on family. And it really cleared up a lot of things, right? Because now they know, like, she loves learning and he loves adventure. So can we blend the two of them and have fun? So just know what's important to you. And I think that'll be helpful.
How many siblings do you have?
I have 4 siblings.
Did that conversation lock in the favorite child? Like that you, or do you already had that locked up?
My dad's listening to this. He knows that's like my catchphrase is I'm the favorite. They will never say it.
That must be nice.
Yeah.
My sister gave my parents grandkids. So for the time being, they are, she is number one. And
I gave my parents the first grandkids. So maybe that.
Yeah, I'm telling you, you locked it in at that point. Everybody else is just playing up from there.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that'll do it for today. We appreciate you being with us. Anything you want us to talk about, future episodes, send us a note. But we'll be back next Thursday. Have a fantastic rest of the week.